You are crouched in the fetid shadows of a stone-walled monastery cell, the air thick with the mingled scents of unwashed flesh, damp mildew, and the acrid tang of forbidden desire, your heart pounding as you witness the grotesque tableau unfolding before you. A hooded monk, his habit hiked grotesquely around his waist, entangled in a frantic, sweat-slicked embrace with another brother, their bodies grinding in rhythmic violation against the cold flagstones, grunts echoing like demonic incantations while the flickering candlelight casts elongated shadows that twist like serpents across the walls, revealing not sanctity, but a putrid underbelly of carnal betrayal that shatters the illusion of holy celibacy in an instant of visceral horror. In this claustrophobic chamber of a 12th century Benedictine abbey, where vows of chastity were meant to elevate the soul beyond the flesh, you feel the oppressive weight of secrecy pressing down, the sharp metallic taste of fear on your tongue as footsteps approach from the corridor, threatening to expose this anatomical monstrosity of brotherly lust that festered unchecked behind monastic facades. A shocking revelation that the men sworn to God often succumbed to the basest urges there. Private degradations undermining the very foundations of their public piety. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. The medieval monastery, ostensibly a bastion of spiritual purity and ascetic denial, concealed a labyrinth of sexual transgressions that range from homoerotic entanglements among the brethren to clandestine fornications with women smuggled through shadowed cloisters, all while the Church's edicts on celibacy, enforced rigorously from the 11th century onward, created a pressure cooker of repressed desires that erupted in ways both predictable and profoundly disturbing. Historical records, such as episcopal visitation documents from dioceses like Lincoln and Norwich, reveal that nearly half of these cloistered communities grappled with accusations of misconduct over a century, with monks like those in the Augustinian Abbey of Missenden in 1531 facing tribunals for carnal relations that included sodomy and heterosexual liaisons, painting a picture not of isolated lapses, but of systemic failures where the vow of chastity often crumbled under the weight of human frailty, leading to a cascade of psychological deterioration and institutional cover-ups that echoed through the corridors of power. Delving deeper into the first category of these shocking revelations, the prevalence of homoerotic practices within the all-male confines of monasteries emerges as a festering wound on the body of ecclesiastical history, where the absence of women did not quell desire, but redirected it toward fellow monks in acts condemned as sodomy, a sin against nature that penitential handbooks like those of the 8th century Pope Gregory III punished with penances of up to a year for males, yet evidence from saints' lives and monastic rules suggest such intimacies were rife. For instance, in Cyril of Scythopolis' 5th century account of Euthymos, the founder warned against allowing young, beardless brothers near his cell to avoid the warfare of the enemy, a euphemism for the temptations that led to mutual embraces and penetrative acts in the dim hours of Compline, where the shared dormitories became arenas of whispered seductions and frantic couplings, the air heavy with the musk of sweat and semen, as chronicled in the emotional communities of early medieval monasteries where bonds of sensual affection bound men together in ways that blurred the line between spiritual friendship and carnal indulgence. Escalating the horror, these homoerotic encounters often involve hierarchies of power and age that mirrored predatory dynamics, with elder monks preying on oblates, young boys entrusted to the monastery for education, who were isolated in separate cells to ostensibly protect them. Yet rules from the 7th century Heavenly Ladder by John Clamachos praised stirring animosity to disrupt lustful pairings, indicating widespread awareness of such abuses. A particularly grotesque example surfaces in the 11th century treatise by Peter Damian, who decried clerical sodomy not primarily for the violation of innocence, but for the profanation of sacraments, overlooking the festering trauma inflicted on youths whose feminine faces were seen as incitements, leading to acts of oral and anal congress that left physical scars and psychological ruins, as inferred from a euphemistic incontinence. In monastic sources where severe punishments flagged the gravity of these violations against nature. Transitioning to the realm of heterosexual transgressions, which carried the added risk of scandalous exposure and progeny, monks frequently ventured beyond cloister walls to brothels or enticed local women into hidden trysts, defying the Church's categorization of fornication with nuns as one of the major crimina. Historical ledgers from the 15th century detail cases like John Shrewsbury of Dorchester Abbey in 1441, who abducted a woman and concealed her in a trunk within the bell tower for repeated carnal knowledge, her muffled cries blending with the tolling bells as he thrust amid the dust and cobwebs, a putrid fusion of sacrilege and lust that exemplified how desperation for female flesh drove monks to desperate measures, including the use of secret passages and nocturnal rendezvous that stained altar cloths with evidence of their emissions. Further intensifying the revelations, some monks maintained long-term concubines, masquerading as housekeepers or laundresses, whose swollen bellies betrayed the fruits of illicit unions, as visitation records from the Diocese of Lincoln in the late 15th century uncover multiple instances where abbots turned a blind eye to such arrangements, prioritizing the avoidance of public scandal over moral rectitude. One anonymous archdeacon of Louvain, promoted to bishop against his will, attempted strict celibacy only to suffer genital swelling from retained humors, his body rebelling in grotesque inflammation that contemporaries attributed to divine punishment. Yet his refusal to take a woman led to a swift demise, highlighting the medical folklore that viewed semen retention as potentially fatal, a belief that paradoxically justified some breaches as health necessities. Venturing into even darker territories of taboo, accusations of bestiality haunted the fringes of monastic life, where isolation and animal husbandry provided opportunities for depraved outlets. Penitentials from the 10th century, such as the one prescribing a decade of fasting for fornication with animals, reflect the Church's horror at such acts, with scattered records implying monks in rural abbeys, deprived of human contact, turned to beasts in moments of madness, the barnyard stench, mingling with the shame of interspecies congress that left psychological scars and risked zoonotic afflictions. Though these cases were rare and often exaggerated in anti-clerical propaganda to underscore the depths of monastic depravity. Compounding these horrors, the practice of masturbation, dismissed in modern terms but vilified in medieval theology as a solitary sin that wasted seed meant for procreation, drew penances of 30 days in many handbooks. Yet within monasteries, it became a clandestine epidemic, with monks resorting to self-abuse in privy corners or under cover of night, their hands slick with guilt and fluid as they invoked visions of forbidden partners, a behavior the humoral theory linked to imbalances, causing melancholy and madness, as seen in the 12th century accounts where excessive onanism led to visions of demonic temptresses, blurring the line between spiritual ecstasy and erotic frenzy. Unveiling another layer of shocking complexity, the flagellant movements that swept through 14th century Europe, ostensibly as penitential responses to the Black Death, harbored undercurrents of sexual excitation intertwined with pain, where monks whipped their bare backs in public processions, the lashes drawing blood that spattered like crimson rain. Yet contemporary observers noted the erotic charge in these displays, the groans of agony mimicking orgasmic release as the brethren achieved a masochistic catharsis that substituted for forbidden intercourse, a phenomenon echoed in the Brotherhood of the Flagellant's rituals, where the mingling of religious fervor and corporal mortification produced a morbid fascination that bordered on the autoerotic. As these revelations cascade into a torrent of escalating depravity, consider the case of the Knights Templar in the early 14th century, accused en masse of sodomy as part of Philip IV campaign to dismantle the order, with confessions extracted under torture detailing ritualistic kisses on the navel and buttocks during initiations. Acts that symbolized submission but devolved into allegations of widespread anal intercourse among the warrior monks, their fortified preceptories becoming dens of homoerotic indulgence where the clash of armor gave way to the slap of flesh, a scandal that, though politically motivated, drew from genuine undercurrents of same-sex practices in militarized monastic settings. Pushing the boundaries further, the intermonastic interactions occasionally bridged gender divides, with monks and nuns from adjacent houses engaging in furtive meetings through shared walls or hidden tunnels, as evidenced in the 13th century reforms that sought to enforce stricter enclosure after scandals like those in Venetian convents, where heterosocial engagement led to pregnancies and abortions. The aborted fetuses discarded in latrines like refuse from a feast of sin, a grim testament to how proximity bred temptation that shattered vows and lives alike. In the vortex of these private dysfunctions lay the seeds of public consequences, where a monk's sexual lapses rippled outward to erode institutional authority, as seen in the 16th century anti-monastic pamphlets that amplified tales of clerical pederasty to fuel the Reformation, portraying monasteries as hotbeds of vice that corrupted the faithful and diverted tithes to cover bastard children's upkeep. Politically, such scandals weakened abbots' influence at court, with kings like Henry VIII exploiting them to justify the dissolution of 1536 to 1540, seizing lands worth millions while the collateral damage fell on spouses, offspring, and subjects who suffered from neglected pastoral duties, their spiritual guides, too entangled in fleshly pursuits to offer salvation. On a personal level, the toll was devastating, with monks like the aforementioned archdeacon succumbing to humoral imbalances that manifested as festering sores and delirium, their relationships fractured by paranoia over discovery, as in the case of William Bell, warden of Grey Friars in Nottingham, accused in 1500 of incontinence with another man, leading to isolation and mental collapse amid whispers of eternal damnation. Families bore the brunt, with illegitimate children branded as monks, bastards denied inheritance and ostracized, while courtiers and servants who witnessed these intimacies faced blackmail or expulsion, their silence bought at the cost of their souls. Attempts at concealment only amplified the dysfunction, with abbots forging documents or relocating offenders, as in the Compendium Compertorum of 1536 that listed sodomy accusations to smear entire orders. Yet these desperate measures fostered a culture of impunity that allowed abuses to fester, turning monasteries into pressure valves where repressed desires exploded in increasingly extreme forms, from group flagellations that devolved into orgiastic frenzies to the use of phlebotomy, routine bleedings, to expel excess semen, a clinical intervention that left monks weakened and pale, their veins tapped like sap from a diseased tree. As conditions worsened over time, the initial lapses evolved into chronic patterns, with young oblates groomed into cycles of abuse that perpetuated across generations, their innocence corroded by elder mentors whose own traumas fueled the predation, as hinted in the 11th century prohibitions against beardless youths that failed to stem the tide. Desperate remedies included dietary restrictions, fish-heavy meals thought to cool libidinal fires, yet these often backfired, leading to malnutrition that exacerbated psychological breakdowns, monks hallucinating succubi in the refectory shadows, their minds unraveling in a tapestry of guilt and craving. Paranoia gripped the cloisters, with accusations flying like arrows in a siege, brothers spying on one another for leverage, as in the 1441 Dorchester incident where Shrewsbury's trunk-smuggled paramour sparked a witch hunt that isolated the perpetrator in a cell of solitude, his isolation breeding further madness until he clawed at walls slick with his own effluvia, a descent into isolation that mirrored the broader monastic retreat from worldly accountability. The final collapse often came in spectacular failures, such as the Templars' 1307 trials where torture elicited confessions of spitting on the cross amid sodomitic rites. Their order dissolved in flames of execution that symbolized the ultimate failure of concealment, leaving behind a legacy of ruined reputations and emptied treasuries. The once mighty warriors reduced to cautionary tales of how private vices precipitated public downfall. In the shadowed terminus of these lives, death scenes unfolded with dysfunction at their core, as with King Louis VIII of France in 1226, whose crusading celibacy allegedly caused his demise through humoral retention, his body bloating grotesquely as unexpelled seed poisoned his vitals, a royal parallel to monastic fates where abstinence turned lethal. Autopsy revelations, rare but damning, exposed anatomical anomalies like swollen genitals or venereal sores, as in the case of the Louvain bishop whose post-mortem examination confirmed the rumors, his cadaver a testament to the body's rebellion against enforced purity. Historical cover-ups ensued, with chroniclers sanitizing records to preserve sanctity, as seen in the suppression of sodomy charges against the Templars by sympathetic historians, yet preserved evidence, scattered in penitentials and visitation rolls. Endures, from charred bones and execution pyres to illicit letters hidden in abbey archives, whispering of the truths that time sought to bury. Returning to that initial chamber where you witnessed the monks' entangled forms, now armed with the knowledge of these hidden torments, the scene transforms from mere shock to a profound tragedy of human frailty under the yoke of impossible ideals, connecting medieval dysfunctions to broader themes of power's corruption and humanity's eternal struggle with desire. In contemporary echoes, from clerical abuse scandals to the isolation of modern celibates, these dynamics persist, reminding us that the veils of sanctity often conceal the same visceral horrors, ending with the haunting image of a lone monk, whip in hand, lashing his back in a dimly lit cell, blood mingling with tears in a futile quest for purity that only deepens the wound. Yet even in reflection, new layers emerge, such as the queer undercurrents in saints' lives like that of Eugenia, who lived as the monk Eugenios and faced harassment from a woman drawn to his male guise, a narrative that queers monastic gender norms and highlights how same-sex desires manifested in disguised forms, challenging the binary of sin and sanctity. This fluidity extended to psychological analyses, where modern lenses reveal sublimated homoeroticism in the erotic faculty described by Maximos the Confessor, binding monastic communities in affections that defied prohibition. Broadening the scope, the political ramifications intertwined with personal failures, as monastic scandals fueled secular encroachments, with rulers like Philip IV weaponizing sodomy accusations to seize assets, a tactic that prefigured Henry VIII's dissolution, where the compendium's litany of perversions justified the erasure of centuries-old institutions, their stones repurposed for profane estates, while the ghosts of abused oblates lingered in the ruins. In the intimate sphere, the suffering of collateral victims, spouses abandoned, children unacknowledged, painted a mosaic of heartbreak, as in the bankside brothels where Winchester geese serve as clerical clients under the bishop's oversight, their venereal afflictions spreading like divine retribution, festering sores that mirrored the moral decay eating at the church's core. As deterioration accelerated in the late Middle Ages, the flagellant processions of the 1340s devolved from penitence to frenzy, with whips cracking against bare flesh in public squares, the pain eliciting involuntary arousals that blurred mortification with masochism, a collective hysteria that infected monasteries and led to expulsions for those whose self-flagellation crossed into erotic solitude. Death's embrace often came laced with irony, as with Maurice, the 11th century Bishop of London, who defied medical advice to break celibacy and prolonged his life through emissions, only to face eternal judgment, his corpse a vessel of contested purity. Post-mortem disclosures, like those in the 1530 suppressions, unearthed skeletons, literal and figurative, from abbey crypts, including malformed fetuses attesting to aborted monastic offspring. The cover-up machinery, oiled by fear of scandal, perpetuated the cycle, with bishops like John Longland in 1531 uncovering but containing the missing in scandals, their injunctions mere bandages on gaping wounds, while evidence like the Ovid Moralici manuscripts moralized ancient tales to condemn sodomy, yet inadvertently preserved the homoerotic subtext that monks pored over in scriptoria. Ultimately, these revelations compel a haunting reconnection. The cell's shadows now symbolize the enduring human condition, where power's facade crumbles under desire's assault, linking medieval monks' torments to today's reckonings, leaving us with the indelible image of a crumbling abbey wall, vines choking the stones as whispers of long-silenced cries echo through the mist, an eternal reminder of history's hidden agonies.